I'm Greg Hunter. Welcome to USAWatchdog.com. With us, a regular guest. He hasn't been on for a while because he kind of backed off the interview and thing, but we're lucky we got him today. It's Greg Mannarino at TradersChoice.net. TradersChoice.net. Greg Mannarino, thanks for joining us today on USAWatchdog.com.
Greg, it's great to be here. Love you, love your show, love everyone that follows your show. It's the truth.
Well, even though you haven't been on a lot, you still contact me every week with voicemails and text messages and staccatos in the market. But we just had this thing. As Sunday breaks, we have this big thing on Deutsche Bank breaking. I mean, they're laying off 18, 20,000 people. They're in a money losing operation. They're technically insolvent. Basically, they're being nationalized, you could say, by the German government. Now they're getting out of basically investment banking and trading. What's this signaling to you?
Greg, when I first heard this, it's kind of ironic. I sat down in front of my computer this morning, and all of a sudden I see a breaking news story regarding to Deutsche Bank pulling out of their global equities, sales, and trading. To me, in this environment right now, this is tremendous. Let's talk about why. Just last week, here in the United States, stocks hit a record high. Week before that, new record highs. No one should be surprised about this that follows my work. I've been explaining to everyone that this is how it's going to unfold in this environment. But the fact here that Deutsche Bank is saying, okay, we've had enough, that should send a message to individuals, and it will send a ripple effect through the entire market. Now, let's put that into perspective. Why would any investment bank be pulling out of the global equity market in this environment, in an environment where world central banks and every single world leader is doing the same thing, calling for currency devaluation, calling for suppressed rates, price controls? This is going to force cash into the stock market. This is how this environment is being maintained. Now, for the fact that Deutsche Bank is saying, hold on a minute, we're getting out, that should raise alarm bells, especially, like I said, record highs for stocks. There's a movie called Margin Call. I am sure that most of your followers have seen this movie, and they say three things: be first, be smarter, or cheat. That's how you make it in the investment banking world. Well, here, this may be a sign that Deutsche Bank now getting out first. This definitely is going to send a message to, I think, the other investment banks around the world. I don't think people need to panic here, and I'll explain why. We understand the twisted mess that we are in right now. The financial system as a whole is absolutely insolvent, and world central banks are going to do what they've been doing, but to a much greater degree, especially in the face of what we just found out. I've been warning people for weeks that world central banks are going to go nuclear this month, meaning they are going to become not just the lenders of last resort, but the buyers of last resort. It is the goal of world central banks to own, this is going to sound outrageous, but to own the world. This is what they want to do with their respective supporting banks. And I can't imagine how anyone who's not watching this unfold can deny that is what is going on here. And the creation of a two-tier society, something you and I have been speaking about for years, Greg, is manifesting itself. But again, it's the boiling frog. People don't want to see it. They don't want to face reality, and they're going to face reality very soon.
Do you think what Deutsche Bank is ringing the bell that this could be the top of the market right here and now?
Well, I'll tell you, and that's the initial thing to me was like, okay, why would an investment bank be pulling out of their global equity department when markets are at all-time record highs? So that you got to put that together. Why would they be doing that unless they believe that we're at a top here? And is it possible that Deutsche Bank, by their action, could you imagine the trading volume that's going to be lost by Deutsche Bank now saying, hey, we're not going to be buying or selling global equities? This is huge. This is huge, and I'm not saying that the market's going to melt down this week, but let me say that this. If people aren't looking at this as a possible red flag, and I mean a big one, well, then they're missing the big picture here. And the other issue is what people have to understand is these banks, every single one is dependent on the next one. It's like a domino effect. And we don't even know what's literally on their balance sheets with regard to collateralized debt obligations, default swaps, all this kinds of stuff. We don't even know yet. And it's going to come to light. Again, one domino falls, that means there are others that are going to fall behind it too. So if in fact this is the beginning of something, and I think it does raise a lot of questions, people need to be prepared for, again, these distortions that we have to correct to fair value. The sad thing, Greg, and you know this.
Well, it can't correct. It cannot correct to fair value.
Well, it's going to correct to fair value, and right now everything is too distorted. We are so far beyond anything before. See, what's happening now is we do not have a free market anywhere in the world. We do not have a free market economy anywhere in the world, including here in the United States. All of the world leaders have chosen to do one thing, open a doorway to allow cash to flow into their stock market, giving the illusion that things are good. But by suppressing debt, by suppressing currencies, by calling for zero rates. I mean, you can go on and on, price controls. This is a horrible environment that we are in. The United States has literally become a third world nation. I mean, could you imagine some guy or girl on a television, let's say from some South American country, calling for price controls, calling for negative rates, calling for currency devaluation? You would say, how could this be happening here in America? Well, guess what it is? That's because our economy is in free fall. No one wants to face it. You know, all they're doing is shoving the fake U3 unemployment number in our face and telling us that our economy is booming. Nothing could possibly be further from the truth. Our economy is in free fall. We haven't had a single piece of good economic news, not just here in the United States, but around the world, in as far back as I can remember. So the illusion is being kept real by the mechanisms that they're putting in place here, by suppressing rates, by not allowing the market to do its one and only job. So that's why we've manifested all of these bubbles that will correct. And the correction, Greg, no one knows how big it is. No one knows where the bottom of this market actually is. Nobody is smart enough to know. All we do know is the Fed stepped in at Dow 6,000 to stop the bleeding. Was that the bottom? Was that the bottom? Or is it Dow 3,000? Or is it Dow 2,000? All we know is they've created an environment where we get these larger and larger swings here. So now we're at the top of the market right now. Whether it's an actual market top, I don't know. Is Deutsche Bank telling us this is a market top? Maybe they are. So the greater the high, the greater the fall. I would not be surprised in a full-on meltdown scenario for this market to drop, the Dow to drop below 6,000, because we don't know where the real bottom is. But that's not even the problem. As much as people want to focus on the stock markets around the world here, we have to understand what we're really looking at. We're going to be looking at potentially another credit freeze, no cash, no transactions, everything stops. What people don't know, Greg, and you know this better than anybody else, is that was the real issue back during the last meltdown. It wasn't the fact that the Dow was cut in half. No, it was the fact that we had a credit freeze, and we are going to get another credit freeze. The dollars in your pocket, units of debt, well, they're units of credit, and you won't have access to them. And people don't understand that. That's it. We're done. We finished. The whole system will have to be restarted from the bottom. And that's really what we're looking at here at one particular point, a complete redo of the system. There's no other way, because this system now is so toxic. It is so out there. It just cannot continue like this, and everybody knows it. But everyone keeps on dancing. They think the music's going to keep on going, but maybe Deutsche Bank is sending us a warning shot across the bow.
Well, just so people know, here's a chart that came out years ago, and they talk about the most systemically most dangerous banks. I mean, up here is Goldman and Morgan Stanley and RBS, and at the center is Deutsche Bank. And the IMF said they were and still are, the most systemically dangerous bank in the world. And they got 43 trillion in derivatives. I don't know, they're technically insolvent. I read. I don't see how you could be solved with that much derivatives and overhang. I guess Germany can take them on, but they only have a 3.8 or $9 trillion a year economy, and they're taking on a bank with 43 trillion in derivatives. I mean, the math for me just sounds stupid. But this is just one of many other awful banks. The banks are leveraged to the hilt. I mean, we could end up with another big meltdown, and who's going to pay for it?
Well, let me just say this for those of you that don't know. Deutsche Bank, including all the other banks, just passed the Fed's stress tests with flying colors. They just passed them. This was just the 27th of last month. It's incredible, isn't it? And they were given the green light to go ahead and buy back massive shares of their own stock. You can see the game that is being played here. Now, who's going to pay for it? Well, it's pretty simple. Just let's look at the last meltdown. Who paid for it last time? Well, we did. There's no doubt about it. Now, what's going to end up happening here? Let's just say, for example, Deutsche Bank, this is the moment, another Lehman moment, which is going to start again with Deutsche Bank. They already have a playbook to follow. More than likely, they're going to sell off all the toxic assets. The central banks will buy them all. They'll put it on the backs of everybody else, just like they did last time. They'll sell off the assets. It'll be kind of absorbed.
Yeah, but it's worse this time, though, isn't it? It's worse this time.
Oh, it's much, much worse because, just like you said, margin debt is at a record high. And what people don't know, and this is the disconnection, people don't realize whose money these institutions are playing with. They're playing with your money, Greg, yours and mine, whoever's got their cash in these institutions. So, and they're taking that money that's not theirs, it's ours, and then they're leveraging it multiple fold. And not just multiple fold, but multiple times and multiple layers of derivatives. Just going back to what you were just explaining. Look, the whole system is so sick. I actually made a little bit of I want to put this into perspective for people. Let's talk about something really, really basic. How about let's talk about soybeans, and you know about farming, Greg. So let's just talk about that real quick. So you got a commodities trader who's looking to buy, I don't know, whatever he wants to buy, soybeans, okay? So he goes to a farmer, that individual trader, and he buys the hard asset from the farmer, and then he sells it on to the market. Then what happens? Thousands of derivatives are now traded on that one farmer's crop. And then there are layers of derivatives underneath that. Does this sound normal to anybody? Because it isn't normal. It's not how it should be, but this is how it works. Now, we don't know the black box. This is what I want people to understand. So you're looking at the equities. We'll talk about Deutsche Bank because that's where we are right now. But every single bank, all of them, with that big chart you just showed, they're all doing the same thing. So this is just not a unique thing to this one bank. They're all doing the same things, Greg, and they all have the same exposure. Every one of these banks, these too big to fails, is dependent on the next one. So a domino effect, it's going to happen. It's just a matter of when. The system is not sustainable. We've known this for a very, very long time. So what are they doing to try to keep it going? They keep pumping the drugs in here by cutting rates. Now talking about maybe going deeper into a currency war, devaluing the currency, devaluing the dollar. How does that help the middle class? How does it help anybody? It doesn't. So again, the illusion is being.
I mean, why are they devaluing? I mean, Trump's been talking about having 0% interest rates. He's tweeting out that we should devalue the dollar and do what other countries have been doing to us for decades. Unfair competitive advantage is what he's talking about. I mean, this whole thing is to keep it propped up. Christine Lagarde she's picked up the gauntlet, the mantra, the banner, the whatever you want to call it. I'll do whatever it takes. Christine Lagarde, former IMF head, and now she's been chosen, and yes, she'll ultimately take over the European Central Bank. And yet, this is one of the many correspondence you had this week. Says Christine Lagarde was convicted of a felony. She didn't spend any time in jail, but she's convicted of a felony. And I thought, wow, she couldn't work at 7-Eleven. Have you been convicted of a felon, Christine Lagarde? Yes, I have. What for? A financial crime. Oh, okay. You can't touch our cash drawer. But she can head up the European Central Bank. They just have to have their criminals. Is this a sign that we're nearing the end when they just must have a criminal, a convicted felon, running the European Central Bank?
Greg, I'm not kidding you. I just literally get chills throughout my body. I want people to absorb what you just said. This woman couldn't work in a 7-Eleven, but she's going to head the European Central Bank. You can't make it up. I've been explaining to people since, like, I'm laughing, since forever, that the environment we are in, literally, if you were to write a book, you couldn't come up with this stuff. People would throw it away. They would say it's just too far-fetched. It's incredible. I'm speechless when I have to think about these things, but you're absolutely right. So we have criminals running the entire show. And the sad thing is,
I mean, she's a stone cold convicted criminal.
Exactly. I mean, and people are going to go, they're going to accept it. They're going to, cheer it on. The market's going to cheer it on because what did she come out and say recently, Greg? Let me get this exactly right. That negative yielding debt is actually good for the global economy.
Yeah,
this is what she said.
Yeah, yes.
This is a quote.
Give us $10 and in 10 years we'll give you, $9.47 back.
Exactly. So how is that good? You see, they spin it, and the reason why they can get away with it is very, very simple. Very sadly, most people are, when it comes to understanding the financial markets, don't have the slightest clue, and they believe that these leaders here, convicted felons in this case, have their best interest in mind, but they don't. And they just let it just go, and they think the party's going to keep moving on. And do you know why? Because they're being told everything is as good as it gets. It's kind of literally like the fall of every empire. It ends the same way. The world leaders at that time, whatever time throughout history, tell them everything is great. Don't worry about it. Just like during the Great Depression, look at the headlines just prior to the Great Depression. As the Great Depression was hitting, when the markets were crashing, just look it up. Let your fingers do the walking, look it up online. You'll see the same kinds of things being thrown out here. Oh, we're going to recover. Everything is great. Things couldn't be any better. This is why people get caught off guard, because they're relying on these sources, not from Greg Hunter. They should be relying on you, but they're relying on these mainstream financial channels and our politicians, all of them, to tell them the truth. And they're hearing lies after lies, and they're being misled. That no, everything's going to get fixed. Look, the middle class, if we haven't learned our lesson by now, then I don't know what to tell you. Always loses, and they're going to lose here too. Basically the middle class has been exterminated. We already have nearly a two-tier society. We have the bottom rung right now, which couldn't be any worse off. We have the middle class in more debt than they have ever had in history, and they're just borrowing just to maintain their status. Well, what would happen if they lose the ability to keep borrowing? 1 in 4 Americans right now, and I'm urging people to do their own research here, is borrowing from their credit card just to make ends meet. This is the United States of America. This is as good as it gets. This is a booming economy. You've got to be kidding me. What kind of drugs do they want you to be smoking or sniffing or shooting? The only drug this market cares about is the hit of heroin that the Federal Reserve has been providing, another hit for now over an entire decade. And, we're getting calls again for maybe even zero rates. This should be no surprise to anyone, because as a matter of fact, if you look around the world in real terms versus inflation, all the debt is now yielding negative if you base it against the actual rate of inflation. So what are they trying to do? They will not allow the markets to do their one and only job. And you know what's going to happen, Greg? They're going to blame capitalism. It's not capitalism. This is socialism right here in America right now. We are subsidizing everything, including big pharma, including big oil.
And nobody goes bankrupt. And that's also socialism. If you believe in capitalism, you believe in bankruptcy. Warren Buffett should have gone bankrupt.
We've created zombie companies, and they shouldn't even exist, but they're being propped up. I mean, when are we going to allow the free market to work? We're not allowing it to work. No world leader, not one, on earth right now is allowing their markets to determine fair value. Instead, they are relying on their central banks to keep the easy money going, to hyperinflate bubbles and cause massive distortions.
Well, one of the things you said this week was, he says, wow, they're calling for 0% interest rates. They're calling for telling you negative rates are good. If this isn't ringing the bell that gold and silver, tangible assets, hard assets, or you should be buying, talk to me about that, because you just came out of blue and just went, if this isn't, the sign. I remember back in 2007 when I think the Fed funds rate was 5.25%. They weren't saying we're going to take them to zero, but now they're saying we're going to take them to zero and negative. And so your point is, if this isn't telling you that you should be in hard assets, you're nuts. Talk about that.
Absolutely. So look, what is the value of the currency? Well, the value of the currency is based in large part off of what's happening in the debt market. The currency is a unit of debt, as most of your followers probably know. So if they're going to push it into zero, this is what we're hearing, or a negative in certain parts of the world, that's dictating the actual value of the currency. It's negative. It's worth negative in certain parts of the world.
You're
Just like
backing
you had
up.
said. Yeah, it's nothing to back it up. So look,
No, you're backing up. Your currency is not appreciating. Your currency, there's no time value of money. There's no interest to make up for the inflation. You just have negative rates and inflation. Your currency is going backwards.
it's
You're
going back.
losing they're taking, not only are you losing buying power with inflation, they're taking it from you. I mean,
Exactly.
Daniel DiMartino Booth says that the Fed is going to go negative.
Well, I believe the Fed is.
Oh, they know they're going to
They're going to
zero.
have to go negative. They're going to have to, Greg, in order to keep. Here's the deal: this entire thing could correct right now, but they're not going to allow it to happen. They're going to keep suppressing rates. They're going to keep, printing cash out of thin air, adding it to a digital screen, whatever they have to do to keep the illusion real. At least maybe through to the elections. I don't know.
But you would be buying gold and
I
silver.
would be.
You're
Of
saying
course.
the bell is ringing for gold and silver, big time.
Good. Bet against this debt. Become your own central bank. I have said this since day one, a decade ago now almost. It's ridiculous. And I don't care what they're going to do to the derivative. Again, let's imagine this, that the hard asset is deriving value from the derivative. How does that work? I mean, it's completely upside down.
Fraud.
That's not how it's supposed to work. A derivative is supposed to derive value from a hard asset. No, no, no. Not when it comes to certain commodities, including gold and silver, the physical assets. So they can play whatever game they want to. Let them do it. Let them play the games good. Whenever I see them hit and they dump a big market order onto the market and the price comes down, I laugh. I literally laugh because we know what all of the world central banks are going to do. Inflate, 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 steal value from the currency. And again, how is this good for the middle class is what I want to know. It's not.
So you would be a buyer of gold and silver
Buyer.
now.
Greg, I am a buyer. As you know, I've been buying this stuff for years. I allocate funds every month that I'm going to put into precious metals. And I don't care. Again, let them play their game. We're going to play our game. Because these things have held value for thousands and thousands of years. And when you hear a central banker or anyone else tell you that these things are barbarous relics, you laugh in their face. Because their product is debt. I want people to understand something, and I want them to understand this very clearly. World Central Bank's power exists in one thing. That is their ability to issue debt. The more debt they issue, the stronger they become. So they're loving this. They are loving the calls for negative rates. They are loving the fact of calling for currency devaluations. They're loving it because the more this happens, the stronger world central banks become. Most people think it's the opposite way, but their product is debt. The more debt they offer, the more is accepted, the stronger they become. So we're watching world central banks, literally all of them, including the Federal Reserve, rise to the top of the pyramid like we have never seen before. That should tell people something. They're not going to lose. The middle class is going to bear the brunt of whatever comes down the pike, just like they always do.
Unless they have tangible assets.
Unless they have tangible assets, of course, yes. But then again, at the same time, look, if we end up, let's just talk about a worst case scenario. If we end up in a worst case scenario where we get a credit freeze, there's no transactions, what are people going to do? They're going to have to barter. I mean, there's the potential for pandemonium to explode around the world. And I really think that's the ultimate goal here. The world central banks want to own the world. They want to own the world. And how do they do that? Well, they have to control the population. As crazy as it sounds, I've explained to people for years, and you've heard me say it, that we're going to end up in a resource problem. The issue is not that we don't have enough of them. The issue is how we acquire them in their fiat currency. This is what they've done to us all. They pushed us into a box and into their system. Very few of us, Greg, you're one of them, I'm one of them. I would hope that there's a lot of people listening to this that are going to try to transact outside of their system by holding a hard asset here. But by and large, most people are stuck in it. And when it's taking away from them, What happens? Pandemonium breaks out. They can't go to the bank to take out any money, and there's any cash, and they can't even use it to transact because there's nowhere to go. This is what happened in 2008 when we had the credit freeze. We're going to face another credit freeze. People are going to riot in the streets. A lot of people are going to die, Greg, because it comes down to a resource problem. We're borrowing from the future to sustain where we are in greater and greater and greater amounts. It can't stop. Once we stop doing that, it's party over. And then again, what are we going to see? We're going to see a massive dying off, sadly, of human population. It's a control mechanism. This is what they're going to do, Greg. Millions of people have the potential to lose their lives in a full-on meltdown.
Are they ultimately going to destroy the euro, the yuan, the yen? I mean, oddly, we just saw this G20 meeting. Nothing came out of it. You didn't hear him talk. You didn't have a peep about any world problem or any. The world problem, the elephant in the room is, yeah, we have crap loads of debt. We've transferred it from corporate to sovereign in the last meltdown in '08. We're not paying this debt back. I mean, China's not paying it back. America's not paying it back. Russia's, although they have no debt. They have very little. Yeah, just unbelievable. What's their end goal? To have one world currency to wipe out all the debts? To your point, a two-tier society. The really rich are at the very top. The Warren Buffett's my secretary pays him with taxes, and I do, you little weasel. Yeah. Anyway. But what's the ultimate goal with all this?
Well, I do believe that this is the current system globally. Is it's dead. It's a dead man walking.
And they must know. They must.
Of course they know.
They're talking about negative rates and cutting the currencies and the no fix. There's no fix.
No.
The fix would be to get rid of the debt, but that's going to be painful. Go ahead.
Well, there's a couple of things they could do. Number one, of course, they understand where this is going, and this is why they're hype. Every world leader and their collective central bank is doing the same thing at the same time. There are hundreds of world central banks. They're all doing the same thing. They're hyperinflating this debt the debt, and that's pulling everything up with it. Equity markets, for example, Deutsche Bank now getting out of it, housing and everything else. These distortions will correct, but all this is going to come down to is very simple: a wealth transfer. That's really, and that's why they're hyperinflating this bubble, because this one is going to be the bubble to end all bubbles. Right now, it's like the Roaring '20s. Everyone thinks it's great. Party's not going to end. Oh, it's just perfect. Then all of a sudden, bam, we get hit with a Great Depression. And that's exactly what we're going to get. A much greater depression. The population is what? 90% greater than it was during the Great Depression. Could you only imagine the entitlement people here in the United States and around the world that all of a sudden they can't get things that they were getting as entitlements? They're going to revolt. So anyway, all this is going to come down to is a wealth transfer effect. We're going to have extreme haves, extreme have-nots, a complete elimination of the middle class. A new currency is going to be issued. It will also be debt-based. Sadly, it's going to be. Why is that? Again, why do we even have a debt-based economic model? It's so governments around the world can fight wars. It's really the truth. They're not restrained by spending. If we had even a fractional reserve system, it would restrain spending. They won't allow that to happen. That's the initial step one, is how we could have fixed this whole system, is to issue a fractional reserve with gold backing the currency. And I know everyone's saying, oh, that's the setup. That's what's going to happen. Nope, ain't going to happen. Because what that would do is that would immediately take the power away from world central banks. All one world leader has to do, whether it's whoever it might be, I was hoping it would be our president, would say, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to back the currency with a fraction of gold. Soon as you do that, it takes the power away from the issuing central banks that are issuing debt, because now it's not a debt unit anymore. It actually has an element of actual wealth in it. No one's doing it. Why? Because they realize this is the end. They have to hyperinflate, create the transfer of wealth, depopulate the world, and then issue in a completely new system. And that's where this is going, sadly.
I think by 2021, you're going to find out the real plan from the White House. I think that he's going to get reelected, and then, oh, honey, hush, honey, bar the doors. I think they're going to default on the debt. That's the only way they could get out from under it.
Well, again, if we default on the debt, what happens to the dollars?
Have a new
They
dollar. Then you have to have a new
They
dollar right
evaporate.
then and there.
They,
You're right about that. I've thought about that.
you're
You're
done.
right.
That's the issue with a debt default. If we default on the debt, that means the dollars in your pocket immediately go to zero. You can't transact.
Yeah.
Done. So whatever wealth you thought you had goes up in smoke. You're done.
You could
You
buy
gotta
quarters and
fix
half
the
dollars.
currency first.
You could buy quarters and half dollars. That's a
Well,
treasury instrument.
you can do that too,
That's a
but
treasury
what
instrument.
about stuff getting to the
I
stores?
know.
How would
I know.
stores be resupplied? How would people go out and it just would stop. We'd go back to Mad Max, so we'd enter a Mad Max kind of a scenario. And the world's central banks, they know, believe me, they're ready for whatever comes down the pike. They already have whatever system is coming. They already know what it is. And they're going to be ready to implement it. They're going to create a massive, massive problem, and then they're going to offer a solution. It's the same scenario over and over again. The one thing we will not do is default on the debt. Because if we do, every single one of us, from the richest person on the planet, unless they have gold and silver, to the most poor person becomes equal. At that point, we're all broke. We're all done. We can't transact. You can't go to the stores. There'll be no refilling the shelves. Everything will stop. The ones that will get out of this are those that know how to farm, those that know how to raise animals, those that understand how to live off the land. But the guys like me, I'll be honest with you, I'll be totally lost because I don't know how to do any of that stuff. I think those are skills that people need to develop in a worst case scenario. But people need to be prepared always for a worst case scenario, because if it doesn't get there, well, then great, we're all good. But understanding how extreme these distortions are and how they will correct to fair value, because this time isn't any different than any other time before. Everyone always says, oh, well, it's different this time. When you hear someone say that, you know you listen to someone who has no idea what they're talking about, because it's never the same.
And whether it's the White House or Danielle DiMartino Booth saying, the Fed's going to go negative, or Christine Lagarde saying negative rates are great and I'll do whatever it takes. You're telling me that that's your signal. If you ever wanted a signal to go buy gold and silver, you're getting it right from the mouths of the world central bankers and leaders right now.
They're telling us, Greg. I mean, they've been broadcasting what they're going to do for a very, very long time. And very sadly, it's only a fraction of the people that have enough functioning brain cells
They are telling us what? They are telling us what?
That, I'm sorry, say that again?
They are telling us what?
They've been informing us what they're going to do. They're going to continue to inflate. They can't stop. It's the nature of the debt-based economic model. It can't stop borrowing. This is why debts and deficits will continue to explode higher with no end in sight. It can't stop. Once we put a restraint on spending and we say this is it, the entire system melts down and we end up in Mad Max. So we can't do that. So understanding these concepts is very simple, that they can't stop doing it. This is why I've been saying, bet against the debt, become your own central bank. But do you know how many people probably, I could count on one hand of all the people that I know, and I know a lot of people that maybe have at least some actual physical gold and silver. But in the end, it's really not going to save us all either, too. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, sure, I got an ounce of gold. Or what can I do with it when there's nothing to use it for? Maybe I can barter with it, but I think people would more than likely rather have a piece of bread. In a worst case scenario. So yeah, sure. Gold and silver maybe will preserve some of your wealth, but I don't think in a worst case scenario it's going to matter at all. We're all going to end up on the same level playing field, and it's going to be very, very ugly for
I'd rather have it than not.
I'd rather have it than not, too. I'm not saying people shouldn't have it. I mean, if you want to protect whatever wealth you have, you don't want to be in a government, in a central bank issued note in their system. This is why, again, you, me, a lot of guys, a lot of girls have been saying, don't get out of their system. Start allocating funds into other things too. Hard assets, and there's a lot of kinds of hard assets too. But gold and silver,
bottled water,
hard asset. Exactly. Silver's my favorite. Still all-time favorite hard asset of all time. I think it's the most undervalued asset in the history of the world. Continues to get even more undervalued. What is the ratio now? The silver-gold ratio, like almost 100 to 1. It's unbelievable. So this is where we need to be, Greg. I just hope people are listening. It's really my one thing, is look around you. Stop being brainwashed. Stop listening to anyone who doesn't know what they're talking about, and try to use your own God-given gift of intellect. You were given the God-given gift of intellect. Use it. Listen to people like Greg Hunter, who are trying to tell you the truth. This is what you need to do, everyone. Start listening.
Gregory Mannarino, traderschoice.net. Everything's, you sell anything on your site, do you? Do you sell anything? I don't think you do.
No, it's all free. Everything, all my publications, everything's free. Everything I do is free. I want people to take advantage of it. And more than that, I want people just to learn where we're at right now, and just be ready. Be ready for what's coming.
All right. Gregory Mannarino, traderschoice.net. I'll put the links to your website. You can't miss anything, but traderschoice.net. I still think that's going to be a very valuable name in the future, more valuable than usawatchdog.com. I think you're going to get, anyway, go ahead. So you the last word.
I want to say one thing real quick.
Okay.
In the grand scheme of things, every Friday, I leave people off with the same thing. And I'm going to say it right here, people. Learn to love each other, learn to care for each other, and be charitable, because we're all in this together. We all need each other. All right. And what they're trying to do is keep us separated by every mechanism they can possibly dream of and things they can conjure up out of thin air. We are not each other's enemies. Don't let them do that to you. Don't let them put you in a box. Understand, we're all got to come together.
That's a very Christian thing to say, my friend.
Yeah.
It is. Thank you. Greg Mannarino, traderschoice.net. Thank you for joining us today. I love that. Thank you for joining us today on usawatchdog.com.
Thanks, Greg.